Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 63. I hope everybody had a meaningful, liberating, kosher and freilich and Pesach, with a focus on the word liberating, Yetzias Mitzrayim, which means to leave and free oneself and be emancipated from all mitzarim v'gvulim, all limitations, constraints, inhibitions, fears, insecurities. That's what Mitzrayim means in our day and age. And especially apropos to the theme of this series, which is Chassidus Applied, what better application than Yetzias Mitzrayim in our personal lives, which is freeing ourselves from every possible constraint, boundary, Meitzer, Mitzrayim from the word Meitzer. Now that we are Isru Chag, this is the day after Pesach, so I'll begin, as usual, with something focused on the time, but it also happens to be a question that has been coming in a number of times to the forum of MyLife forum, where you can submit your anonymous questions at meaningfullife.com/MyLife, where you can submit any question. If you want to write something personally, we can respond directly to you. Send it to my personal email address, Simon, SIMON, at meaningfullife.com. And that's a question about character refinement. Why is there no emphasis on character refinement in our education system? It seems to be a prominent theme in Chassidus, Birur Hamidus, which means to refine, to improve one's emotional faculties. Why then is not emphasized in our homes and schools? Now, why is it so apropos? Because coming from Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim, even though it's 3,327 years later, but in every generation, a person has to see himself as if he's leaving Mitzrayim. And the Alter Rebbe adds in Perek Mem Vov in Tanya that it means b'chol yom v'yom, also meaning on an ongoing basis every day. So leaving Mitzrayim, it means psychologically and emotionally, as he explains there, and also in Perek Lamed Aleph in Tanya 31, the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim Beruchnis means the Nefesh Elokis is freeing itself and running away from the challenges and being held hostage and being enslaved by the body and the animal soul and all the material desires that so seduce seduce us and trap us in its tentacles. So that's why it's appropriate to talk about. But it goes even further, as we shall soon discuss, because Pesach leads right into Sfiras Omer, which connects it to Shavuos and Matan Torah. So, on the second night of Shavuos, as the Pasuk says, Mochris HaShabbos, which the Gemara teaches means Mochris HaPesach, meaning the second day of Pesach, V'sfartim Lechem, in the Parsha Omer, you shall count 7 weeks, 7 times 7, 49 days, and the 50th day will be Chag HaShavuos, which is why Shavuos is called Shavuos. It means weeks. It means the weeks, the 7 weeks that are counted, because it's the only holiday that is completely contingent, not on Kiddush HaLevana, not on sanctifying the moon, but on the counting of Eden from when Pesach begins, second day of Pesach. What is the significance of that? So besides the technical mitzvah, what does Chassidus explain, the premise of the mitzvah? So first of all, there's the Dran, the end of Masechta Pesachim, that explains why we count. One of the reasons is because when the Jews left Mitzrayim, they were b'shteikukus, they were yearning to Matan Torah. They knew that as the whole purpose of leaving Egypt was in order to come and serve God at this mountain. So they counted down the days in that yearning. When someone is really expecting something, you count every day in anticipation. And hence we also do the same thing. But Chassidus goes even further and explains that the Sfiras Omer is Omer Se'erim. That's why Omer is the measure that was used of an Omer Se'erim of barley. And what is barley as opposed to chitim? Barley is a grain that is Michael Behema. And Chassidus explains, the Alter Rebbe, L'Kutei Torah, and elsewhere, that Michael Behema, what is it is? Aveda of Birur of the Nefesh Habamis. Nefesh Habamis is the animal soul, as explained in Tanya, and it has its inclinations, it has its emotional faculties, as he explains in Perek Tes. What are they driven to? Self-interest. The emotional faculty is the self-interest of the animal soul, which really is the makeup of every human being on this earth. And hence, following Mitzrayim, what happens is they began counting, not just counting, we begin refining each one of the 7 midas of the Nefesh Habamis. Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Chayid, Yesod, and Malchus. 7 times 7, because of Iskalus, each midah, to really refine it properly, you have to refine every one of the 7 within the 7. And that's why in the counting you'll find Chesed Shebechesed, Gvura Shebechesed, Teferet Shebechesed, all the way to Malchus Shebechesed, which we just finished week 1. Then comes week 2, and it begins the Birur of Gvura, and the Birur of Teferet is week 3, and the week 7 would be the Birur refinement of Malchus. In response to questions of many people who asked me about what does this mean in my classes, so years ago, almost 20 years ago, I wrote up a sheet which later became a very popular book called The Spiritual Guide to Counting the Omer. This year, we actually upgraded and updated it as an app. You can find it in all the app stores, both for Android and iOS. I know all in the same breath, Birur Hamidus, Likutei Torah, iOS, Android, but I guess that's the way that God created the world. All that technology is meant to be a platform for Birur Hamidus, for refining ourselves. So the book, which you can of course get in many bookstores, also online, and we also send out a daily email, and the app, all are there to give you an exercise, a meditation for the day, to actually allow yourself to personalize the refinement of the Sfiris. So long before this series of Chassidus Applied, I've already been involved in Chassidus Applied in the context of Omer and other ways, and other work that we do at the Meaningful Life Center. So how fitting is it then to talk exactly about that, character refinement? What is the Veda of our time, is of this period of time, these 49 days, is exactly that, personality development, character refinement, and not just Bechlolos, like the Rebbe brings very often from Shara Yichud, from the Mittler Rebbe, Shara Yichud, which was considered to be, until Samach Vav and Ayin Beis, was considered to be the most Yiseidizdike, the map of the cosmic order, the Seder Ishtalshalos, is still the map, but then it was far more elaborated by the Rebbe Rashab. So in Shari Yichud, in the Hagdama there, in the beginning, he writes about, not Hagdama, in the first chapters, he writes about that you need to have not just his bonus klolis, but his bonus protis. As we all know, everything, God is in the details. If you want to talk about refining yourself, to just say I'm going to become a better person, it usually doesn't work. To say I'm going to refine my chesed, my kindness, my love, my giving, is also very general. But when you start breaking down the chesed of chesed, the gvura of chesed, then you start identifying where you have strengths and where you have weakness. Some people give, but they don't know how to discipline and tame and season the giving. Some people have too much gvura. So when you start breaking it down, that's when it becomes far easier to apply to yourself and to actually do something that will refine these particular emotions inside of us. As a matter of fact, a number of years ago, I received a very moving phone call from a practitioner, a psychiatrist in Salt Lake City, who worked with in a rehab program for drug and alcohol addiction. And he told me, not even a Jewish group, he said to me that he uses the Omer book as a mandatory journal, that each of the clients, each of the patients has to keep a journal to follow each day. He says it's the only book he found that was able to really get people to focus on details. And in their journal, they write where they have their strengths, where their weaknesses, what are they doing to complement or compensate for the areas that they're weak in. And he says that literally he sees visible improvement. It's a very proud moment to be able to witness a mitzvah that seems to be so abstract or so disconnected from personal life. Initially, just you count the days. But when you take the chassidus of it, the pnimius of it, that it could be applicable even to a drug and alcohol rehabilitation, to people who have nothing to do with the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer, it was quite powerful to see the universal application of chassidus in that way. So absolutely, it's not just some type of adjunct or some type of addendum. Is the foundation of Yiddishkeit, foundation of chassidus, is in refining oneself. Because that is what you're given. Your Gufa Nefesh Abam is refining it and aligning it to what the Eibishter wants. So the question, therefore, looms large. What's going on with our systems, our education systems? Why are they not emphasizing this aspect of Birur Hamidus? And I'm not here to criticize or to analyze why. I'd rather talk about what we can do about it. Why? Usually why things happen like this is simply because people either have not paid attention or don't know how to do it properly. And we have to be made at each other to do this. So here's not a place to go criticize. The point is to correct things. The foundation of a person is a derech eretz called Torah. Even before learning Torah is a derech eretz, menschlichkeit. You could learn Torah, you could do mitzvahs and not be a mensch. It's very clear. That's why you need the word derech eretz called Torah. Precedes Torah. which means it's not even a mitzvah. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that thou shalt be a mensch. It says do not steal, do not rob, do not murder, do not the other do nots, and there's the do's and don'ts. Because it's kadmul Torah. It's a foundation. It's an axiom. Why? Because halachta b'drachav, we're created in the divine image, and we're asked to follow and emulate the divine behavior. Mahu chanun, afata chanun. It's a yesod in all of Yiddishkeit that we are emulating. We take our lives, and instead of just following whatever your heart and your here we have 210 years that we live in bondage, in a place called Mitzrayim, Mitzarim v'Gvulim, in the klipa of in personal terms of the guf and nefesh habam is the body and the animal soul. And then comes the time, as the Alter Rebbe elaborates in Perek Lamed Aleph in Tanya, ki borach ha'am. He says, Zeu inyan Yetzias Mitzrayim. The nefesh halikis ripping itself away from the being held hostage. There he's talking about atzvus and simcha, and he says, the context there in Tanya is that the simcha that you have from knowing that any of your depressed states, all of your negative feelings are connected to the body and animal soul. On the other hand, the divine soul is trapped there. So the simcha is to know that the great rachmanas that has to be, the great compassion and empathy we need to have for our divine souls, that it's trapped in prison. And the simcha that it has, that you, through your work, are able to return it, like he says, Kanarel lebeis aviyah. Like a daughter that was kidnapped or held hostage, you're returning it back home. That's the simcha. Imagine the simcha after someone is kidnapped, God forbid, and then they are freed and brought back home. What kind of joy a parent has? What kind of joy the child has? What kind of joy the whole world has? That's the simcha of the divine soul being freed from the animal soul, and that's in our hands, the work we do. So when a person is mizbeinin in that, he says, Alter Rebbe, how you can actually be the one that freed the kidnapped child. Can you imagine? You're celebrating someone else freed. You're the one that has the power to free that kidnapped child. In this case, the kidnapped soul, the soul held hostage. That is the greatest simcha. And he says, Zewi, this is Yetzias Mitzrayim. And with this, the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain, as often in Tanya and Inyan Pshuti Shel Mikra, in the psukim and the verses, and as well as in Inyan and Nigla the Torah. What? It says, Ki borach ha'am. They asked to leave Mitzrayim for 3 days. That was their request. And then the Jews said, Kiborach, they ran away, they never returned. So Alter Rebbe says, Lama, Tzador Pella. Why did they need to run away? Why did they need to fool Pari? Pari had suffered the Makis, and he would have no choice to ultimately release the Jews. He would have forced them out. As we know, B'shalach Hasam, he forced them out because enough of you. With Makis B'cheres, he had enough. So why do they have to run away? Why does there have to be a borach? And the Alter Rebbe explains in his inimitable way, because the borach is not mitzad Pari, not because they were afraid of Pari and they had to fool him. It's because it's all about the personal experience. The Jewish people, on a personal level, psychologically were enslaved by the tumah, by the toxins of Mitzrayim Erves Haaretz. They were completely polluted by it, and had they not run, they would have not been able to free themselves from it. So it's about them having to run psychologically and emotionally from that type of trapped. That's why Baruch Ha'am. La'asad Lavi, that Alter Rebbe continues, when Ruach HaTum Avim in Haaretz, and there will no longer be pollution in the world, you don't have to have Chipazon Teitzei, Loi B'Chipazon. You will not need to rush and run and escape because there will not be Tumah. But once you have Tumah, when you have a body that is keeping you trapped, there's a need for desperation. There's a need for feeling the need to run out of prison. You have to run from the burning building. Desperation. There's a burning building. Get out of here. You have to get out of here as fast as possible. However, that's not a sustainable lifestyle. To run from a burning fire and healing, when you need to run, you run. But then you need to build your life. Comes Sfiras Omer on the second day of Pesach, where we begin to now, we ran out of the polluted, toxic environment of Mitzrayim, of our own material trappings and inhibitions and fears and insecurities. And now comes the next step, which is the step of working on it. Now to make it a sustainable life model, a lifestyle. And you go step by step, chesed shebechesed, through malchus shebemalchus, in turning yourself bepnimius. Baruch ha'am is a desperate act. You run. Now you have to build a life. You can't build a life running from fires, running from burning homes. You have to build a life by step by step in an organized way. Ma'at agar shenu. You can't bite off more than you can chew. Tefasta merubah tefasta. You have to do it step by step. Slowly refine yourself. Look at your chesed shebechesed, gevura shebechesed, teferet shebechesed, and we build 49 days, and then comes the 50th day, which we don't count. So asusa delay baruch ha'am, we run out of Mitzrayim, that the Eibishter himself, v'lei malach lei acher, kveide ba'atzmei, redeems us, and we run for our lives. Then comes the asusa latata, especially in the month of Iyar. In other words, Nisan would be the month of Chesed. Am shacham amayla, kinar Yisrael v'aveu. Then comes Iyar Mamata L'mayla, where the Sfiras Omer, where we work on ourselves. And then comes Teferes, which combines the Mamata L'mayla, Mamayla L'mata, Teferes Amat and Teira. The Teferes is the third rod, the middle path, Kavam Tzoy Teira, that comes now and joins together, that allows heaven to meet earth. But earth cannot meet heaven out of desperation. It has to be through our build-up, 49. You can't have 50 without 49. Then comes Matan Teira, which we'll discuss when we get closer to that. So this is a psychological model based on Tanya Perek Lamed Aleph that is applicable specifically to our time. And now the work is each of us to find our unique way of refining your particular midah of chesed shebechesed, gevura shebechesed. Someone asked me a question that they heard from somebody that the derech of Chassidus is not necessarily personal refinement, just in general, birur hamidus. And I beg to differ in every possible way. There's no reason that we would count 49 days and each one says chesed shebekvar, gevura shebechesed. It's true that some people don't know what it means. So as remember when I did research on the topic, some mashpiyim told me, we rely on, I said, what's gevura shebechesed? Okay, the first week we can figure out some more or less. But what's teferet shebiyasod? What's malchus shebehoid, etc.? So someone told me, you rely, the Eibishter does it. When you say the Hiratzin after Sfiras Omer, God will fill already and refine the mezachich and refine that particular tumah that connects itself, that particular pollutant or toxin that connects itself to that midah. But that would suggest that there's no aveda on our part, that we just simply say the prayer. I think it's far more appropriate than Chassidus. The Chassidus doesn't spell it out in detail because each of us has to customize it. And each of us has another way of applying our chesed and our gevura and our teferes. In the book I did on Sfiras Omer, I was attempting, as I wrote there, one application simply to get people going. But there's definitely many different types, and adarab, on the contrary, let everybody apply it in their unique ways, and please share any feedback you have on this matter. So we are now in a time of that exactly, character refinement. We have to insist, both at home and in our schools, that this become a integral component in chinuch. Again, I'm not here to go criticize what exists or what doesn't exist and why or why not, but like anything in life, when it comes to our attention, yes, this is something we have to begin to teach our children and ourselves from the youngest of age. Even before children begin to speak, even before children begin to understand things in a conscious level, how you behave has to be in a refined way. Simple things like saying thank you, saying good morning. When you see a temper tantrum, obviously children are children, helping them discipline themselves. When they come of age and they can understand, rewarding, discussing, and above all, looking at yourself. Because at the end of the day, our children mirror what we do. If we react with anger, our children will learn to react with anger. And Sfiras Omer is exactly given for that purpose, to absolutely look at ourselves. And it's sad to say that our institutions and educational schools and so on are not focusing. It's sad for me to read the question even. But you know, Yedias Hamachal Chetzi Refuah, have the cure is knowing the problem. And we have to acknowledge it. And perhaps our schools are more structured in order for the average student, and they don't have the resources to focus on the whole personal character development issue. But there's no question that this is something which is the foundation of Chassidus. And if we demand it and we make noise and we bring it to everyone's attention, I have no doubt we can create change in this regard. It has to be done in a respectful way. It doesn't have to be done in a chutzpahdik way or in a way of defiance and offending anyone. Usually the best way to succeed is by not offending people, but by speaking kindly, speaking menschlichly, but speaking in a way that shows that you care. It's important to you. And if parents join together with schools, I am sure no one will disagree that we'd all have a better school system, a better homes, and better world if we had better children. There's a line that's been going around. They say, let's build a better world for our children. No, that's not correct. Let's build children for a better world. So children are going to be the creation of a better world, which means children that have midas tevus. Birur ha-midas. The Rebbe brings from the Frierdiker Rebbe that the whole union of Chassidus from the Alter Rebbe is the saken as midas hativim or tivesiv or teva midesav. The two different parts in the Yonah Shal Teres Chassidus, the Rebbe brings it. But regardless, it's about focusing. Can we go and change and repair everything? But we start step by step by step. And here's the time of the year when we do that. So that's Chassidus Applied, Post-Passover, and Omer counting. Moving right along, let me go into a few topics that are part of the essay contest, which we concluded right before Pesach. And as I announced in the last episode 62, 2 weeks ago, that anonymous donor chose to give $500 to the top finalists, not just to the top winners. Top winners will get their $10,000 and $3,600 and $1,000 for the two twin for the tied to third place. But the rest will get $500 and B'kar of Mamish. B'kar of Mamish means very shortly, right after Yontif. But what we've been doing is creating a new segment here in this MyLife to review these essays. They'll all be posted. We're posting them. If you'd like to see the posts, you go to meaningfullife.com and subscribe to our special list that we've created for the MyLife, and you'll see it there in the contest. And there you can also find the landing page, which we have, where we're posting every week more essays for your reading, and I will be reviewing them. So I've reviewed the first top 4 essays, and I want to review the next 4, just briefly, as much as I can here. So the next 4 essays will go in the order of the 4th place winner was Judith Kasowitz, a mother homemaker here living in Crown Heights, age 28. And she wrote on the topic, how to cope when life throws the unexpected at you. And it was considered a top-rated essay by the judges, which I went through that process in the previous episodes. Essentially, she took the issue of the question of belief and acceptance in God and all that comes from Him. Gamzu l'teva, and the idea of finding Kol Mada Ovid HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'tov Ovid, and how one can look at Tanya Perek Chavov, where he talks about the different types of depression and apply it to personal life. She also quotes the Sichos and explained the difference between Tanya Perek Chavov, Geras HaKedesh Simin Yud Aleph 11, Epistle 11, talking about how you apply it. Now, what was unique about this essay was obviously anyone can learn the Tanya, and that was not the point of the essay, just to translate Tanya, but applying it to life. She took the situations in life where a person finds themselves in a situation that they did not expect, difficult, challenging situation, and actually applied it in a way that every person can read and find personal relevance, which is taking the ability to step back from your emotional subjectivity and surrendering or accepting the bigger master plan. She actually went ahead and put it into bullets, into system, how to do it during davening, how to learn in Tanya. She actually created a methodology that everybody can apply, which of course fit very much the criteria necessary in the MyLife contest, which was to create methodologies that everybody can apply, everyone can understand, different ways, thanking God as much as possible, accepting moments of pain, submitting them to God, reviewing Tanya, how to meditate during davening on this subject, and so on. And more that you can read. As I said, this entire essay will be posted. If it's not posted yet, I think it's already posted on our website. And if you subscribe to the MyLife to the MyLife mailing list, you'll receive this in your inbox as the new essays are posted. The next one in 5th place was Michal Morgenstern, age 34, from Haifa. And her topic was dealing with a challenge in her own personal life where her husband was called up to go to the Gaza war, and how she applied concepts in the Rebbe's Igris and letters, where betochen and faith, to her personal life. This essay actually was marked very high for personal application because it was completely about her personal life. The reason it was not number 1, I spoke to some of the judges, was, and I'm not here to defend their judging, because judging was on many different criteria, because it was not as strong in the area of the sources of Chassidus, but it was extremely strong in the personal application. And as I said at the outset with the contest, this was not a black and white contest where you win by multiple choice and it's a right and wrong. There was no right or wrong. This was an extremely powerful essay in a personal application, a personal life, and we all appreciate how sharing her own ordeal and then finding strength in the Rebbe's letters and the Rebbe's themes about dealing with challenges, including her own, how to find strength. And it's really a fascinating essay that I recommend everyone reading, because you really see how a person really struggled with the idea and how Chassidus actually helped her really come to a point where she was able to find a way to redeem and free herself from her fears and from her concerns and get and transcend. It's very human, very personal, as I said, and therefore very relevant. She too lists at the end of her essay a bunch of bullets of how to deal with difficult situations, when you have difficult situations to cope with, which includes how to find simcha, to snap yourself out of a dark spell, how to, again, surrender to history doesn't always play itself out according to your rules, how to take control of your ruach, your mood, your spirit, how to be a leader in difficult times, the schus of living in Eretz Yisrael, the responsibility to others and to self, and so on. And again, this essay will be completely posted, so you can read it in its entirety, if it's not posted yet. She based up some of it on the Sikha, famous Sikha in Lamed Vov, in Chelik Lamed Vov, L'Kutei Sichas, Targut V'Zayngut, which was some of the grounding of the sources, and a few other sources, which again, you can all see in detail. Sixth place. The sixth place was written in Hebrew by Shifi Goldfarb from Ma'alot, age 21. Yes, the ages and the names of the people continue to surprise myself and everyone who's reading them, because you just see people you never would have expected or you didn't even know exists, and it's very encouraging to hear 20 people in their 20s, all of those that I've just read, people in their mid-20s or young 20s, that they can be applying Chassidus is just a tremendous contribution in and of itself. Now, this one was a very fascinating one. I read it and I was extremely taken by it because it's extremely creative. She applies the concept of Eris and Kalim to address the issue of ADHD, attention deficit disorder, and its variations. And the concept of Eris and Kalim to look at children who have difficulty and therefore are sometimes seen as poorer and weaker students. She applies it and says sometimes it's simply looking at a new way at them, not as weaker, not as low attention span, but sometimes more energy and less containers, or weaker containers. And in a very fascinating way applies a Chassidic concept of Eris and Kalim to a real life situation. Now, I'm not a trained psychologist or trained psychiatrist, but I have no doubt that an article like this, an essay like this, can be the basis of a tremendous insights, how Chassidus can actually perhaps revolutionize how we look at children, especially children who have some of these dissonances, or you can say imbalances, or inconsistencies. And Chassidus talks much about the imbalance between Eris and Kalim. Here, what this essay could have used more was more sources, especially in Ayin Beis, the end of volume 1, where he talks directly about how Eris and Kalim, in different forms of way they are imbalanced. That imbalance is psychologically where someone can have great energy and weak containers. I once heard that there is, when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, he had many Chassidim here. Some of them were children of Chassidim and so on. Some of them became more assimilated, but they still had the Chassidish Bendel and the Chassidish Ruach and spirit, being very mekusher and supporting and in every possible way helping the Frierdiker Rebbe. There was one Chassid, or however you want to call him, they would come to the Farbrengens. You could see him in some of the pictures when the Frierdiker Rebbe is in Lakewood, standing there, not far from the Frierdiker Rebbe. And they said that between Sichas, sometimes on Shabbos, he would go out and take a smoke. And some of the Chassidim were extremely disturbed. Here's a man standing right near the Frierdiker Rebbe, such a great support, such a Chassidish dedication, but on the other hand, very weak in the area of Shmira Shabbos and other mitzvahs. So someone asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, what does he say about that? Frierdiker Rebbe answered that Had Greise Eres and Kleine Kalim. He has great energies but weak or small containers. The Rebbe in Chof Ches Nissen, Tov Shin Nun Aleph, said that to make sure that the work be done, Eres the Teyu, aber in Kalim the Tikkun. Eres the Teyu is of course Eres Merubim, intense energies, and Kalim the Tikkun are Kalim Rechavim, expansive containers. So this essay, this particular essay, is a very fascinating in that sense, applying it. As I said, it could be applied to children, it could be applied to many people who have a type of, they have a tension, you can say, a tension, a disproportion between the intensity of their energy and the weakness of the containers. And she applies it in this case to ADHD. Again, strongly recommended. Right now it's in Hebrew. At some point I hope we can be able to translate it. That's sixth place Shifri Goldfarb from Ma'alot, and Yishakayach for that. Very powerful essay, which, as I said, at the end of the day, all these essays could have all won the first prize. It had to be one person, and then second prize and third prize, based on all the factors coming together. So no one should go away with any type of impression that one is simply beyond all the others. Every one of them had milas, every one of them had features and virtues that the others didn't have. That was sixth place. In seventh place was Chelsea Mika Shar, 25, age 25, from Johannesburg, studied at Mayonot, where she writes about speak what you mean and mean what you speak, the importance of silence, thinking, sorting, and separating. And using the ideas of Chassidus in Hemshech Ranat about Dibur and other places, she applies it into the concept of how one speaks, how they align their speech to their thoughts, not to speak too much, not to speak too little. Also a very interesting psychological take on the three levushim of Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa, and how we take our emotion, our intellect, Chabad and Chagas, which is the emotions and the intellect, and how we balance them or how we express them in the garments, which are called the levushim of thought, speech, and action. This too, reading it was quite fascinating, because again, you see a lot of creativity, originality, and in applying it, and how to cognitively restructure one's form of expression. The particular thing that struck me was also her sustainable methodology for change, in the topic in where she lists a whole list of step one of realizing that we are inappropriately linking fact and emotion, and dealing with the issue where sometimes our emotions distort how we understand things. So it really had two elements, this essay. That was one that I just said. The other was how our expressions and our speaking should reflect what's going on inside, instead of it being either too impulsive and so on. Then she has step one, step two, step three. It's a little too difficult to sum up all of this here. Again, I encourage everyone to read this. And again, a well-done essay, and congratulations to you for your effort in this regard. And with that, I conclude this segment of reviewing these essays. And I'm sure if anyone has any comments on any of them, once you read them, please post them or send them to us. And this can be a life of it. Each one of them can take a life of its own and bear fruits upon fruits, branches after branches and branches, which of course is the whole point of the MyLife Chassidus Applied essay in the first place, to create a perpetual movement toward the direction that Chassidim everywhere, people everywhere, hopefully one day millions of people should be submitting essays and models and methodologies and formulas of living a healthier and more psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually healthier lives, which is the theme of this entire series. Frankly, the theme of Yefutza Ma'anesecha Chutza that the Rabbeim charged us with, the Mashiach charged the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov and the Rabbeim told us that this is the key shlichus. This is the core mission, which is the dissemination and distribution of the mayonis, the wellsprings of Chassidus, applying it to real life. So thank you again to all these, and we will continue this in the next segments, the next episodes of MyLife, reading further, summarizing further more essays and posting them. And please, as I said, this is always a two-way street. The more you give, the more we're able to produce, and in a way that we can get your questions and your insights and your input and your essays and so on. There will be more coming. Many ideas have been spawned. You'll hear more as we ourselves develop this approach into further programs and further exciting initiatives. Okay, let's move on to the next question. And this is advice. My wife is not davening. Okay, let's read the question. My wife doesn't daven. My mashpia told me to leave her alone about it, but it really bothers me. I was told not to try to change my wife, but I never knew until we were married that she doesn't daven. Shabbos she davens, but not during the week. I used to mention it every once in a while, but it always brought uneasiness between us. She's tried for a while davening mincha, but it doesn't seem that lasted. I wouldn't ask at this point. Is it an obligation for a woman to daven every day? Maybe not bisman, but at some point during the day. If not, isn't it at least an expectation amongst Lubavitchers? At least I thought so before I got married. What can I do now to try to help my wife in this area? She knows that it's something that's important, but her actions don't show it, not even on Sundays when there's no excuse of work. Looking for advice on how to go about this. My mashpia told me it's none of my business, but it's still in my mind constantly. Okay. Well, it's very difficult to answer a question like this without speaking to the writer himself. I would wonder, when I read a question like this, when you dish it out, you have to be ready also to take it. Now, what's your matzav in your davening? Are you davening lip service? Do you spend Shabbos davening 3-4 hours under your talis, as the Rabbeim and Chassidim always did? How do you daven? It's very easy to criticize others, and the question is to look at yourself. The best way to have your wife live up to the standards you're expecting is you yourself should be living up to them in your way. I have no doubt, without saying a word, if she saw you in that type of way, I'm sure that would have impact on her without you having to say anything. The second thing that rubs me, frankly, the wrong way, anyone that starts looking at, especially their spouse, even a stranger, with such type of critique, without saying anything positive, I start wondering if there are other issues going on. And this again is without context. I read the note. It'd be very nice for me to just say, yes, a woman should daven and just do this and do that to manipulate that she should daven or try to impress upon her. But I say it again, two things. In Halacha and Shulchan Aruch it says, Odem achabed ishtei yeseh megufei. I'd be very interested to know if you fulfill that halacha as well. And what the relationship with your wife is. If this is the focus, davening, as if everything else is working well, then we can talk about it. I highly doubt it. I'm not trying to give musar, but as soon as a person starts using gvura and starts sort of demanding and writing anonymously about such an issue, you have to be ready to talk about the whole topic. So I challenge you to find yourself a mashpia and talk about it, but talk about everything. Talk about yourself. Talk about your own Yiras Shamayim. Usually I find, and again, it's not a generality, that most women are usually more Yiras Shamayim than their husbands. So I wonder as well, what is the reason that you want her to daven? Is it because you're suddenly so devout and that's the only thing missing? Is it just because you have other tainas and this is just one way to express them? And you see, I'm not addressing the issue itself because I don't want to feed into, if there is indeed other factors involved, for me to feed into and say that, hey, yeah, you're right, and then go back to your wife and listen, Rabbi Jacobson said Sunday night that I'm right and you should daven. I don't think that's the way to go. But as I said, so to sum up, number one, everything should be b'darkei ne'im, b'darkei shalom. Number two, I don't know if this is the first issue one should address. You don't see where the Rebbe writes or demands in Sichos or in other places that he wants that women should daven. He wants women to be a keres habayis, to teach and educate children with Yiras Shamayim, ishak sheira eser etzein baila, to be an example and to help a husband become more Yiras Shamayim, more of a chassid. And you don't see so much that focus. So I'm wondering why this bothers you so much. And again, if something bothers you, then you have to live up to the standard. And I want to know how much you daven and how you daven. That's what I would like to know. Now you could say it's none of my business, fine. But you wrote this question to me. You're asking me to make a statement about it regarding a spouse. So I feel responsible to say what I just said. I remember once after Chazorah, when I was a bocher, I was standing after Chazorah, which finished like midnight in 770, Farbrengen. After Farbrengen, Shabbos, we chazed the whole Farbrengen and reviewed it and so on. I was walking out of 770, it's like midnight at night, who's around in 770? And a balabos comes over to me, married man, with a kapota and a gartel, and he says to me, they say you're an expert in the Rebbe's Sichos. I didn't agree or deny it, and I said, so how can I help you? He says to me, where does it say in the Sichos of the Rebbe that a wife should listen to her husband? So I said, Shahaya. Now, Bichlal wasn't so comfortable. I'm a bocher. Why are you asking me such questions? But then I realized that maybe it's Ashgacha Pratis. I said to him, I don't know of such Sichos. She starts yelling at me. What do you mean there's no such Sichos? Of course there's Sichos. So I say, may I ask why you need a Sicha from the Rebbe to show you that wives should listen to their husbands? She said, yeah. He said, it's not about me. There's somebody I know whose wife refuses to listen to him. If I had a Sicha to show, I'd be able to bring it to this guy and he could show it to his wife, and now then she'll start listening. So I said to him, since you're already telling me it's not you, so we can talk a little bluntly. If it was you, I wouldn't be so direct. But since you're saying it's somebody else, this Sipur Hayadu of the Rebbe Marash, why doesn't your friend come and tell me that a friend sent him? You know the famous story that someone came to the Rebbe Marash and said that he has a friend that did a terrible thing, but he's ashamed to come to the Rebbe, so he's sent me as a shliach to get a tikkun, some repair. So the Rebbe Marash said to him, why does your friend have to expose himself to you? If he's so ashamed, he should have come to me and say, I have a friend. So that was basically, I took that approach, and I said to him, so since it's not you, tell your friend that maybe you should stop looking for sikhs that say that a wife should listen to his husband. Maybe you should start behaving like a mensch and looking Shulchan Aruch and says, a man should honor his wife more than himself. And then I am sure that will engender and evoke respect from the wife to the husband. Depends how he's behaving. Maybe he's behaving in a way that doesn't deserve respect. This guy started yelling at me, and I said to him, why are you taking it so personally? I thought it was your friend. You get the idea. Anyway, so I am not here going to paskin about whether the woman should daven or not. Every woman should go to find herself a mashpia and rov. And then I finally want to say, I don't know what a husband should become suddenly his mashpia to his wife about pratim like this. In general, it's not good for marriage, where husbands and wives suddenly become the rabbonim. Aseh lecha rav and knei lecha chaver does not mean your spouse. It doesn't mean your parents either, for that matter. So in general, a husband and a wife should find a way to have shalom bayis, bring up their children, obviously with metechir shamayim, Chassidus, and so on. And if you need direction and hadrache, and how much avedus Hashem, and how much davening or not davening, both for man and woman, find yourself a mashpia and go talk to that mashpia. The Frierdiker Rebbe says in Asicha, I think it's printed in Sefer Memorim Tavshin Yud Aleph. That is the Frierdiker Rebbe's Tavshin Aleph. The Rebbe printed the year after Tavshin Yud. I think there's a Sikha, I think it's printed there. It's definitely a Sikha that I saw, where the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Allemo leichter reiten auf jenem Sverd, which means it's always easier to ride on someone else's horse. We all have a horse. We all have a nefesh habamis. Chassidus derech is you work riding on your own horse, and you melamed zchus on people, other people. To ride on someone else's horse and start demanding, number one, then the microscope goes on you in discussing where you stand, and number two, that's become not a derech and aveda that you're busy with other people's aveda, even if it's your spouse. Through love, through example, through being more refined, through being more derech eretz, is the best way to influence everybody, especially a spouse. Okay. Next question. Next question is connected to how to respond and advise on sensitive matters. Recently, someone in my community confided in me something that they did that was inappropriate. As their rabbi and as a community leader, what is the right thing to do? Question 2. As a leader in my community, how do I address sensitive topics that are brought to me? Whether spousal issues, psychological issues, or other areas that I don't necessarily feel qualified to counsel on. 1 second. Question 3. Recently, a couple in my community came to me and told me that their child came out and told them that he was gay. They wanted my advice, but I wasn't sure what the appropriate advice for this situation was. Can you help? To what extent should I interfere with a family in my community whose child is engaged to a non-Jew? They are asking for me to get involved, but are afraid of making their child estranged, or in general don't know what to do under those circumstances. And many other questions over time, over the months, have come in that similar vein. Some that I remember that are the gist of them goes as follows: that if someone shares with me something that they did wrong, whether it's a leader of community or even individuals, what should be our attitude and response to this? So across the board, whether it's for leaders, for shluchim, for rabbis, or for individuals, someone shares with you something, what should be your attitude? Now, as always, we have to remember there's no one-size-fits-all, it's case by case. It's very difficult to advise one general way, but there are general principles that I think are important. Let's start with, first of all, your general responsibility when someone shares something with you, and then go into some details of how and what approach to take in particular situations. First of all, when someone comes and confides something in a person, the hashgacha pratis is that God sent that person to speak to you for some reason. Maybe you can do something about it. just ignore it and say, hey, you know what, it's not my business. I'm not going to stick my head in someone else's issues. They shared it with you. That doesn't mean you have to immerse yourself and do everything possible, but it could be that you have to alert them or help them find the right direction. So if someone comes and confides, let's say they did something very wrong and hurting someone else, especially if it's a continuous thing that hurts. If they come and share something that happened 20 years ago and it's not happening right now, that's I'll address in a moment. But if something that you see is continuously and possibly going to hurt, an infidelity or other types of behavior, so what you have to do is not necessarily you be the one, but you have to direct the person to speak to someone that they can trust, that will be confidential, and help them to get through this, because you may be the shliach, the messenger, that can help them stop the bleeding. Many people feel sometimes they're doing something wrong, and they just find someone that they confide in. If you feel competent and you are in a position because you're trained or you are a leader of community, then by all means, do what you can, but always have some consultation with professionals what to do in a circumstance like that. To just ignore it is irresponsible. To immerse yourself in a case where you're not necessarily the most qualified or competent person is also not right, but to find some middle ground, meaning finding the right type of people and helping direct that person. Now, very often, this comes point number 2, a person may confide something, but they're not really ready to do anything about it. They just wanted to get off their chest. They just want to feel somewhat like, it's not a total secret. It makes them feel less guilty. If you identify indeed, and that happens quite often, then if it's a close friend and someone you can speak to openly, you have to say something like, I understand you're sharing it with me, and it's painful to hear, and I am happy to help you in any way I can, but you have to remember, your life here is at stake. Your marriage is at stake. Your children are at stake. All depending, of course, on what the issue is. And I'm not here to mix into your business, but once you brought it up to me, don't you think we should find some way to act on it? Now, often what will happen is you may never hear again from that person, or they will say, I'm dealing with it on my own, whether they are or they're not. So here again, you need to take discretion, have discretion, because it doesn't mean you have to pursue it. You shouldn't become a detective. It's not necessarily your mission. If a person doesn't want to be helped, it's very difficult to help someone that doesn't want to be helped. You have to try your best, like the halachas of haychiach, techiach, hasamechsecha, techacha, is that you have to try once, twice, 3 times. If you cannot do anything about it, even though it says ad mei apamim, but at the end of the day, it's because there's hope that there's some help. But if you cannot do, then basically you can just say, listen, I really think you're digging yourself a bigger hole. It's time to nip it in the bud. I'm here as a friend. I'm ready to help you in any way possible. But I can't do something if you're not interested. You have to find the right ways. And again, consulting with someone that's a professional would be very helpful. Now, as far as leaders of communities, rabbis, shluchim, and so on, here again, you have to assess your own ability of being able to help. Some rabbis and community leaders and shluchim are very competent, excellent, very good listeners, and if a person wants to speak, by all means, that's a sacred part of your duties and job, is to let a person bare their soul search. And not due to your curiosity, humbly listen very closely, because you never know what the roots are. Try to get to the root and understand what's driving this person to behave that way. And then say to them, why are you speaking to me? Not as a challenge, but try to get them to articulate, what are they reaching for? Do they want to stop? Do they want to behave differently? Do they want to do something else? Try to get them engaged in a mature way, that not just they broke the silence and shared with you a confidence, but something is being done about it. Obviously, always good to have a professional guidance. This means either sending them to a professional if you see it need. Many times people come to see me, I assess the situation, I try to get some clarity, and then sometimes it's clear to me they need a professional, a therapist to work with, and you try to be an additional support. Most cases, rabbis, community leaders, and others are not necessarily therapists and don't have the time and the energy to invest week after week, but you can monitor it. If you can monitor it, you could help them if they have a doubt or a question. You could help motivate them if they start feeling they don't want to go to therapy, and so on and so forth. Always we want to also work, if it's in a case of marital situation, to ultimately get both spouses to work on it, if it's appropriate. Then there's issues like you mentioned, the issue of being someone announcing gay or intermarriage and so on. Now you're getting into far more complicated matters. Again, everything is ashgacha pratis. Someone shares something, you have to do something about it. What that to do is the big question. The minimum is to help them find someone that can speak to them. In my situation, personally, people do come to me about some of these type of matters. In some situations, I feel I could help by either calming the air, lowering the volume of the tensions, so there can be at least some intelligent communication, trying to cut through the smoke screens and see what's really going on, what the real problem is. And sometimes you see the absolute need for the parents or for a child in a situation, for example, like the issue of someone announcing that they're gay, to go for help, to at least for their relationship, they should be able to figure out how to speak to each other. Obviously, it touches upon far deeper things because you're dealing then with a person's entire lifestyle and other matters, which I don't think is the scope of this discussion. I think the point here, what I'm trying to address, is that you have a role to play, the person who this was confided to create as much as possible. We're not able to solve all problems, but you can always help minimize the pain, stop some of the bleeding, create a calmer environment, and just that itself helps and is what makes things more conducive to getting some solutions. Because often what happens in these type of situations, sensitive matters, once they come out on the table, people's emotions and reactions become far bigger problem than the original problem. Collateral damage, it's called. So you think of it like bringing a bleeding patient into an emergency room, God forbid. The first thing you need to do is stop the bleeding. Because the bleeding doesn't allow you to identify where's it coming from the neck, from the knees, from the toes, from the head, God forbid, from the heart, from where's the wound? So the first thing is to clear the air and just to be able to identify here are the issues on the table. And that is what a facilitator, a teacher, a rabbi, a community leader, a shliach, has the ability to do. Again, if you don't feel competent, find someone that can do it, but not to ignore. There's no such thing as ignoring, especially if you're in a leadership position. Even a friend is important. If someone comes and confides, the same approach. You have to be there to help that person. You never know when someone's crying out for help, and you may be the person that God sent, or for some reason that person trusts. So never underestimate that role to play. This doesn't mean you always have a solution, but caring and empathy goes a long way. Many people simply need someone that's just to speak to, someone that cares. And caring then translates into what you can do, what others can do. It doesn't hurt to always get opinion of another person. About interfering on your own, I'm of the belief, and I don't think it's just my belief, I think it's something I learned from the Rebbe, that in general speaking, you help people who help themselves. Obviously you can say if you see something happening, you have responsibility to do something about it. But at the end of the day, you go over to someone who's doing something and they never approached you. They will say, why are you meddling? Who asked you? And so on. And you could say, what difference does it make? You're seeing a crime, you have to do something about it. Yes, if you see a murder, or you see abuse, or you see something overt, by all means, in some way intervene, in a way that will be productive, obviously. But very many of the situations are not so black and white. They're not like you see someone running around with a knife in the street. There are situations that are far more subtle, they're far more complicated, there are many more dynamics. There's a whole family pathology involved, or history and so on. So there, it's much more complicated to say, do I intervene or not? There, the best thing is, obviously, if someone reaches out for help. But should there be a situation where you really think some bad things are happening, then you have to find people that they will listen to. Because if the people that are involved in this, whatever inappropriate or imbalanced or abusive or dysfunctional situation, they're not going to. You can't. Someone who they will not listen to is ridiculous for them to approach them. You have to find who listens. Who would they trust? Is it a rabbi? Is it a friend? And that's how you try to alert it. Sometimes you have really very toxic situations where you almost can't pierce the barriers and the armor that some families, dysfunctional families, create. So then, you know something? You have to choose your battles. You cannot solve all problems. You have to find the right boundaries and to know when to interfere, not to interfere, and so on. I hope that suffices. I'm happy to talk more about this topic. If anybody has more questions or needs more elaboration, I'm more than happy. And as well as if you have anything from the Rebbe directly. What I've said, I believe, is a collective gathering of the ideas that I've heard without even identifying necessarily a particular letter or sikha or yechidus. So I would wish to be able to find specifics. If anyone has them, please send them on and I will definitely share them. But I believe this did do justice in the spirit of the Rebbe's approach, a Chassidic approach to this issue, which is a vital issue, which is your role you play in your community or in your colleagues or among your friends or among your among your co-workers, etc., and family as well. Next question. I can't understand and apply Chassidus to my personal life. Can I seek spiritual guidance outside of Judaism, which I find far more accessible and practical? Another questioner asks in a little different tone, truthfully, I'm not interested in going out of Judaism Torah, but I can't use Chassidus in its original form. I'm not equipped to apply its teachings. What should I do? Okay, this is a question that I've heard from many, many people, and it's about time to discuss it. I'm sure I touched upon it in different earlier episodes, but maybe not so directly. This includes people who've asked questions, for example, they find in yoga or other spiritual disciplines, psychological disciplines, outlets that are very meaningful and very helpful. And of course, the first question is halacha. Are those practices inconsistent, incompatible with halacha and Torah? That's a question for a Rav and a question for a rabbi by looking at those practices. I know that the Rebbe, of course, and I spoke about this, and Tov Shalom Teh spoke much about TM, Transcendental Meditation, of using that in a kosher way, and stripping it of any of its unkosher elements, of anything that may be Avodah Zarah, Avizrayud Avodah Zarah, and so on, things that touch or tinge upon things that are opposite of Torah and are connected to pagan practices or idolatrous practices. And the same can be said about yoga and other matters that may have roots that are not so appropriate, but they have definitely methods that work. So, and there are other disciplines as well that are outside of Judaism. Now, number one is my heart goes out, obviously, so many Jews I know that found God through Buddhism. And then many of them, some of them at least, returned to Yiddishkeit through that. And we discussed that in the past. That's after the fact. But the sad part is, it's all in Yiddishkeit. It's all there. It's in Torah and in Chassidus. Everything you'll find out there exists in Chassidus. But the sad reality is that in other disciplines it's been articulated. There are books, there are formulas, there are algorithms, there are methodologies. It's been turned into a science that's accessible, applicable, and easy to implement. And not because it's necessarily easy disciplines. Our challenge, which is so much why I'm doing this MyLife series, and why we did the essays contest, and hopefully much more, is to change that status quo. We should take the thousands of pages written by the Rabbeim Chassidus and turn them into accessible models. That still doesn't answer this question. What do we do right now? Someone will say, I'm a young person, I've discovered those books. Maybe it was wrong for me to go there, but I did. Chassidus I don't find speaks to me. What should I do? It's a very good question, a very difficult one to answer, but I have to say the following. If it's indeed can be shown that it's not connected to anything that is Hepech HaTorah or Halacha, then it's like reading a book. The Alter Rebbe writes in Perek Ches and Tanya, it talks about Chocham's Chitzenius, and the Rebbe speaks about it in letters about Hesach Hadas, that sometimes to get your mind off something negative and you need something spiritual, it could be that the spirituality that at least talks to your soul is better than obviously falling into Sholosh Klippos Atmeis completely. On the other hand, he talks about being metames Chabad shebenefesh when it comes to wisdoms or philosophies and spiritual systems. But then there's, of course, kadem lachterba if you use it for something of Kedusha. So it's a complicated discussion because I have to say that from a point of view, from the standard, obviously you should be able to find it in Chassidus. A second step would be, even if you're going to look outside of Torah and Chassidus and find something there, find a way to use it in Chassidus. Use it in Torah and Yiddishkeit. Use it in Avodas Hashem. But barring that, the lowest level would be to find spiritual satisfaction or spiritual sustenance from there. I have mixed feelings about it. My personal feeling, and this is what I feel, is that if a person's already been doing it, and they're interested in moving, like this person asked, they don't want to stay there. They want to move it to Yiddishkeit. Okay, so you learn something. Now use it, like we speak about Tshuva. In a way, what have you learned from that? And now go back, and maybe you can find it in Torah and Chassidus. And become part of this, become a pioneer in this revolution of turning Chassidus into such a model. It may have come from being inspired by something outside. It came. That's exactly what Tshuva is. Lechatchila, someone will say to me, you know what, I can't find it in Chassidus, should I go turn there? I would not tell them, yes, go turn there. But if they've already turned there, and they're already getting inspiration to tell a person to stop taking that sustenance. Again, we're saying we're not talking about something hepech halacha, something that they're doing or reading or practicing something that is that transgresses. Then I would say is find a way to now take that and transfer it back to the world of Torah, Kedusha, and Chassidus. Because at the end of the day, if someone, let's say, takes psychology, and psychology teaches them something, secular psychology, why can't they use it now? Come back into Torah and Chassidus, and Adarabah, use it. I would say the same thing is about spirituality. But l'chatchila, our job is, and that's why the complicated matter is, our job is to make sure that the person shouldn't have to go there in the first place. So if someone came to me, I would say, listen, why don't you listen to Sunday Night Chassidus Applied, read these essays, find ways to find it in Chassidus. It's easier, maybe easier to read elsewhere, but this is the place to turn to. So I would not condone it, but at the same time, ultimately every adult has to make their choices. Someone comes back to you and say, you know something, I didn't take your advice, I did read the book that you told me I shouldn't read and I should find it in Chassidus. So you can just yell at them and criticize them, or you can tell them, okay, now find a way to bring it back and channel it. So it's a complicated matter because it's as you see here, it's a subtle step away. I don't want to say to endorse such a thing, but at the same time, you cannot disqualify, you cannot invalidate a person's spiritual yearnings. You can say that may not be the place to go to. Find it in Torah. Meanwhile, you're finding it there, then direct it back to Torah. But you want to have to yitamu chatoim v'lo chaitim. You want to validate those other systems, perhaps, because you have it in Torah Chassidus, but you don't want to invalidate a person's search. And you can by doing that, you can demoralize someone and just not let them really find the destiny that they should be looking for. That's why it's important to be able to be compassionate and kind in communicating about these matters. Even if you have critique over what they're doing, it's best to find a way to direct them and channel them. Like say, what has inspired you in that system that you've read? And then find a parallel in Chassidus that can help them say, oh wow, that's in Chassidus, I didn't know that. Now, again, the long-term objective would be to turn Chassidus into a formula that is so compelling and so indispensable that no one needs to turn out altogether anywhere else. But that's our job. And until we don't do that, we can't just simply blame everybody for turning to other things because we have not satisfied and filled, we have not given them the water to drink. So they start drinking other water. You could say, okay, it's not good, but they'll say, okay, what do you want me to do? Remain thirsty. So let's work fast and hard to make sure that we can preempt all these types of questions. And Mola Oris Deis Hashem Kamayim Leyam Mechasim, like we said in the Haftarah Achron Shal Pesach, that a world filled with divine knowledge, that like the waters cover the sea, so there's no room for any other. Since the water's covering the sea, it's like completely all-encompassing. There won't be room for other drinks that are dietary or Coca-Cola or other what do we call them, knockoffs and false duplicates. Give them the original Mei Hadas HaToyer, Teres Achsidis, Pnimis HaTeira, Moyer Shebetera, and applying it to people's real lives so that in a way they don't need to have any other thing except Chassidus. And that will be ultimately when Mashiach comes, which is Bekor of Mamish, that the entire world will be turning to Chassidus for its solutions. Exactly as the Alter Rebbe writes in the Gedomet Tanya, that it's a sefer of eitzes for all Anim Avodas Hashem. And if you extend that to the Rambam's end of the Rambam, means not just for Yidden, also for non-Jews. Because Mola Oris Deis Hashem Kamayim Liyam Mechasim, like he says, Lo Yiyeh Esa Kol Ha'elam El Ladasas Hashem Bilvad. The Lo Ella Le'ikuva, meaning there's nothing else but Ladasas Hashem Levad. And where are they going to find Dasas Hashem Levad? Teres Achsidis, Yedias Hashem, Seder Ishtalshlus. The mitzvah Roman is Gova Me'ed, as the Alter Rebbe writes in the Geras HaKein, Kuntres Achron. So all that will be fill the world with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, and because automatically when there's das and godless hamechen, and we can coexist and we can tolerate an opinion that's different than ours because it's all in the context of Deis Hashem and bittul, then there's leya reya v'leya shchisu. May we merit that right here in the shadow, called the shadow, the light of Achron Shal Pesach, Sudas Mashiach, the day of Mashiach, which is Osimar Domalka Mashiach. This has been MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 63, and we continue our series next week, episode 64, 8 to 9 p.m. every Sunday evening. Please send us your questions at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. And we will continue also reviewing the essays Please look forward to many new exciting initiatives, and we welcome any ideas, any suggestions, any thoughts you have on how we can actually make Chassidus a viable and practical blueprint for every human being on this earth. Thank you very much.